This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Victoria Noethling. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, how are you?
Oh, doing
I am
good.
doing well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. This episode is actually we're at episode 960 of our podcast,
Ooh,
tracking that
that's
since
awesome.
2016. Uh, we're on our road to 1,000. And again, we've got your website up. Find your leadership confidence, and it's got the // schedule. But I think you can go to that find your leadership confidence. Is that the main site?
Yes. Yes, that's the main site. If you want to schedule a podcast, you'd use the other. But checking out the
Yeah, that'll be
podcast, just
fully
use whatever.
that'll be fully clickable when we're published on all the platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast. So people will be able to go right through on
Right.
that. And then for this episode, we're going to talk about leading with your heart, head, and hands.
Yeah.
So if we can get into that conversation, maybe you can give you a little bit about your background. You've been in the
Yeah.
corporate world for
A long
over 40
time.
years. Yeah. And maybe you
Yeah, a
can talk
long
about what,
time.
what you're doing today.
So I started working in corporates in the late 70s. And they're actually didn't even have computers. It was just typewriters. And my first job, I was introduced to this new thing, and I was such a crappy typist. I was great with shorthand, but not so great with typing. So I was like, yes, yes, teach me, teach me. And it was really one of those
Hmm.
things, that life lessons, where even if you don't know what you don't know, just say yes and take the risk that everything will work out okay. And it did. And so for many years, because I went to business school for 6 months and went right into the corporate world. And so I leaned on mentors and people to tell me what to do for many, many years, and was given a lot of great insights, a lot of great guidance, and but always lacked that confidence that I knew what I knew. I always had that self-doubt and did self-sabotage, if you will. And
Hmm.
so then whenever I got to Georgia, my husband was a teacher. He got laid off whenever the steel mills closed in Pittsburgh. And so we moved to Georgia, and it was another one of those gifts where, okay, Vicki, you don't have a job, and so you're married to a teacher, so you've got to have a job. So what are you going to do? And I worked for RB's corporate office for a little bit, and became a construction coordinator, and that was my first taste of project management. And then they moved, and so once again, I was the person whose job was leaving, and so um, I just decided, okay, I'm just going to put myself as a temp worker for a while. And I only did that for about a month, and a job with UPS came out. And UPS was one of those things where I thought, okay, um, I'm going to see what I can do there. And, UPS at that time in the 80s was all leadership was all men, mostly, hardly any women. And so my mentors were men teaching me how to lead, with a hammer as opposed to your heart.
Hmm.
And so, you had that feeling of, okay, I'm just going to say yes and I'm going to do these things. And I became finally a project manager, but it was after many years. I was a supervisor of people, and that's how I got interested and not really interested as much as driven to leadership and to being a public speaker, trying to hone those skills so I could communicate with my team, motivate my team. And I found that I was able to get them to do a lot of things, but it wasn't by the prescribed way of people, how people taught me to do things, yell
Yeah.
loud and my way or the highway. I kind of listened to people more, and I got to know my team. I led them the way I wanted to be led, and it was making an impact. But every time I went up for a management role, I was told, well, no, you're too soft. You just don't really have what it takes. And I'm thinking, I get these people to do anything I ask them, but I don't
Yeah.
have what it takes. And
Well,
again, there's that self-doubt, that mindset of, okay, you didn't go to college. All these people have master's degrees. You must not know what you're talking about. And it wasn't until they said, oh, well, the only way you can get a degree or a promoted is to have a degree. So at 47, I went to
mhm.
college online for 4 years while I was on the road all but 4 days. And I did very well because, hey, guess what? I learned a lot of stuff along the way. And it was fantastic that I now was in top of my class, and people were asking me for advice because of all this experience that I had. And so that's when I decided at 50, graduating, that I was going to lead the way I knew that I needed to. And so I started to lead with my heart, in, involving empathy and making sure that my team knew that they were more important than that project, but I needed them, and without them we couldn't survive. And so putting people first and using emotional intelligence, and being, then once you have the team understanding the values and the mindset and the mission and how they were part of that solution, and without them it couldn't happen. And it wasn't, well, I'll just find another person to fill that slot. It's like, no, you're vital to this. It changed the way that they thought, and it changed what they could do. And so then all of a sudden, I was being asked to be put on projects all over the place. And all around the bend, I'm turning 60, and it's like, well, I think I'm done doing this, and I'm just going to go do what I love. And so I took a couple years after retiring at 2018, and started my business, and then COVID hit. So that's my story.
Yeah. That's that's it's real interesting that the kind of men's club there didn't think. I've seen situations. I went to school like a school called Bowdoin. And Bowdoin's got like this whole kind of history of these
Yeah.
people, and I didn't come from that history. I came in because I had the qualifications. I got in, and there were guys coming from all these like Pinkerton Academy, all these places, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
their parents had gone, their grandparents had gone, whatever. And so they always came up with excuses about like why you couldn't be in this or couldn't be in that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm already here, but you're still coming up with excuses. So I mean, I've seen that kind of thing that happens, and it's kind of like if you've got capability, I've seen people get those roles without having like
Yeah.
the background to really do it. People who
Hmm.
aren't the top of the class, but they somebody knew them and they got the role.
Yeah.
So like to me, it's like show me what you can do, and you showed people what you could do. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's a lack of like empathy for people's capabilities and just looking at it in a very narrow way. And the way
Hmm.
the world is today is very holistic. You have
Yeah.
to look at like what markets are you losing because you've got this boardroom that's kind of monolithic. So
Yeah.
are they really
Yeah.
thinking about every market they could get to when they don't have the imagination to know what's in that market because they don't want to go beyond what they're comfortable with. Um,
Yeah.
so like
I
I
think I
do
think
do yeah.
I think one of the things that was always a benefit for me too, besides saying yes, even though I don't know if I can really do it, I'll figure it out, is really kind of the way it was. But because I was exposed to, I worked in an accounting firm as the front desk office, but did also tax returns and things with them. And then I went to a one girl office for a year where I did everything, bookkeeping, wine list, everything for wine and spirits, which was really one of my favorite jobs. And then I went to work for Arby's. And as I said, I first was doing operations, and then I was doing construction as a project coordinator. And then I went to UPS and did technology. And so I was involved in so many aspects of business that it was impossible for me not to understand business and be able to gain insights. And so when I became a project manager, I could call upon all those different things and all the people that I met along the way that saw that I was a doer and not a complainer. And so it was easy to ask for favors or ask for people to do things because they knew, it was payback time for them or whatnot. But I think a lot of times people just don't look at the big picture. You talked about holistic, don't look at that big picture and think, how am I involved in this to make a difference and the solution of it. And so whenever I did decide to start my own business, everything that I learned along the way, I could incorporate. But I also remembered in 2021, that was my year of yes. It's like, okay, I'm going to start a business. Okay, I'm going to start a podcast. Okay, now I have 200 episodes. Okay, what's next? Okay, somebody asked me to write a chapter in a book. Okay, I'm going to do that. And so I think it's that attitude that don't think about what could go wrong, just start to think about, well, what does the outcome look like? And how can you make it a positive outcome? And then go from there. So,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've done, I came into podcasting in 2016 because I'm a musician and I'm a
mm,
software designer. So, and I'm a podcaster. So I got a lot of hats. But one day in 2016, this guy found my SoundCloud and he said, "Hey, I want to interview you on a podcast." And I said, "What's that?" I didn't know what it was in
ah,
2016. And then we
yeah,
did our first episode and we liked each other so much, we did a podcast for 6 months together. And that was
nice.
something I wasn't looking for. It just kind of came to me. But I was willing to
Yeah,
kind of engage on it without even knowing what it was. Like what you were saying is like, and then,
yeah,
now I'm a podcaster and I've been out here for a while. And, it grew from just doing it on a phone to doing it,
yeah,
audio with better equipment to doing video. And now we have sponsors and we're doing all kinds of things, but it's just it goes beyond what you expect because
yeah,
I think you have to have your ear and your heart and your mind kind of open to opportunities
yeah.
and
And
things
you
will
also have to
happen if
shut
you're
out
kind
the
of
noise, right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I'm
you got to
sure
figure out what you want.
in 2016, I mean, I know what I hear now when they people say, "Well, can you make money in podcasting?"
Yeah, I didn't really
Is
care
that
about that.
really a thing? And for me, it's just really opens doors for me to do what I want to do, and that's to connect people with other people that can help them grow their business. And it helps me along the way. That's fine. But my initial goal was just to do this to help others so that they didn't struggle in their 30s and 40s like I did.
The thing about podcasting, what happens is it gives you this very authentic platform where it's not an infomercial. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's live. A lot of times, well, I've had over 900 episodes. I've talked to like all types of people around the world. Got a big Rolodex
Yeah.
of people I've talked to, and it's given me opportunities out of the blue. Somebody will say, "Oh, can you write some music for me? Oh, can you do this for me? Can you
Yeah.
talk to this band for me?" And I get people. I mean, I've talked to Grammy award winning producers. I've talked to CEOs. I've talked to therapists, and I've talked to authors. I've been very expansive. And one person told me when I first started, say, "Oh, you got to be very narrowly focused." And I kind of
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
kind of like talking to everybody. And so
Yeah.
my whole
Me
thing is
too.
it's very expansive, and that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but I found that was like this thing that just opened up this whole world, and I get these opportunities that I didn't really plan on.
Yeah.
And it just gives, and I'm the kind of person I like to try things I never did before. Like you jumped into
Mm-hmm.
things that you didn't know about, and it gives me that that impetus to get into stuff. And that's why I
Mm.
found, very exciting. So I totally understand where you're coming from, where you're trying different things because you felt like why not? Because
Yeah.
it's like, you think about, um, if you think about Orson Welles when he did Citizen Kane,
Hmm.
there's a big interview where somebody asked him, it's like, how did you do all that? I said, well, I didn't know what I couldn't do. I thought my eye, I thought my eye, the camera could do exactly what my eye does. And then people told me, oh, it
Mm.
doesn't. I said, why not? And so he came up with all these ideas that the people
To
said, well, you're not
fix.
supposed to do that. And he said, why not? And so he just
Yeah.
challenged it. And I've always been the kind of artist that's like, why not do that?
Yeah.
Even though they tell you not to do it, it's like, well, why can't I break the rule? Because,
Mhm.
what happens if
Will
you
it
do
put
it?
me in
Is the
jail or
world
kill me?
gonna
That's
end?
my whole thing.
Is it gonna, is the world gonna end? It's like, why not
Yes.
try something? You know?
Yeah, that's so true. As a project manager, I always had to look at opportunities. When I did process mapping before I did the project, so I could understand where the process had gaps and opportunities. But I love whenever I found those opportunities because then it was the what if. I love the what if. And as a leader, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to consider the what ifs and not why not, but what if you could do that? And that's what makes it really exciting and fun to go to work every day because you're thinking of what if, as I meet all of these awesome, interesting people, I start to think, well, okay, I've done this podcast, I've done this. Now I really think that it would be more impactful if I take this to the next level and do retreats where I can have just a small group. Because what if they could spend 3 days with
Mm,
these people as opposed to just an hour to really get into what they could become and possibly turn out in their life. And so everything that I do, I don't think of this uh, as you said, just a one-stop shop kind of thing. It's like, how can I expand this to be more, to be better, to help people in different ways?
Yeah. Do you find like I've talked to a lot of people on the podcast that are like, they're in mentors or they're business leaders or they're in this kind of thought leadership, and they are doing retreats, they're doing symposiums, they're doing master classes, or they have one-on-one with clients where they'll say, well, I'll do multiple sessions with you over a certain length of time. And that seems to be where things are going, and the podcast kind of kicks it off, and then it expands
Absolutely.
into that
Yeah.
field or that
Yeah,
area.
and every time I talk about my leadership track, this heart, your head, and your hands leadership, it opens doors. I have a course coming up for a company. I interviewed the person to talk about their marketing piece of their company, and in our discussion, the organic part of the discussion that I love to pull out, uh, we just started to talk about how important it is for us to train our people today, that we spend so much time putting out fires, and in companies as even large or small, they tend to not think about teaching and training, and that
Mm,
somehow
yeah.
some way these people will evolve into great managers or great people. And so I said, it's just to me so impactful of when I was going and starting out, especially at UPS. Every week I had an opportunity to train and to learn. So even though I didn't have a degree, I
Yeah,
still was getting educated. And I actually matriculated the last year of my college life because of all that I learned through those type of personal and professional development. And so through the podcast, I have this opportunity, and another place I have, well, you can come into my coaching, and another place is, well, maybe I'm going to come and work with your youth. So it's amazing, this platform, how offers us these opportunities to be more than we thought when we started with that
yeah,
first
definitely.
podcast.
I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. I'm 55, but when I got into IT, I got into a kind of cool position, and this is back kind of in the days in the 90s where you
Yeah.
actually got trained. So I came into a big insurance
That's right.
company, came out of Bowdoin, and I didn't want to be a programmer, but I kind of wanted to do. I was a government legal studies and
Mhm.
sociology double major,
Oh,
but I
wow.
liked computers, and I was
Yeah.
into it. And I'm an artist, so I came in to the insurance company. I had this pitch. It's like, what if I write like research papers and talk to the business people and
Yeah.
talk to the programmers and kind of bridge it. And so I became one of the first of the business system analysts during that time, where you used to
Mhm.
have just programmers writing everything, but then they couldn't explain anything to the directors. They were too much of eggheads to do it, but I could understand them. So I got into this role where I was the bridge between the executives or the business people that had problems, and then I would put it into a way, put it into this kind of what we call requirement design documents or use
I
cases
know
today
very well.
of what it meant,
Mhm.
right? And so I was at the beginning of that whole thing. And I ended up going to
Mhm.
all these companies. I was in Japan for 2 years, but I was never a comp sci degree guy. But I've been in IT for over 25 years, and I'm
Wow.
still working. I'm working for a big technology company today because there's this thing where like I figure out what somebody's business problem is, and I put it in terminology that the
Mhm.
programmers understand and the business people understand, and they figure out how they're going to code it. But I go
Yep.
and logically define it, and it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be code, but I found a way to create kind of a career that wasn't really there, and no one had really
Yeah.
said what that was when I was in school. I was like, "What is that?" I kind of just found it. So a lot of times you can kind of, if you just have that drive to say, like, I'm going to take what I learned and find a way to, you know, integrate it into this business. And,
Yeah.
I think that's where people in business have to understand that, when you don't train people, you just keep on wanting to take somebody's ready made.
Yeah.
Like, well, how
Yeah.
many ready made people are there? You
No.
have to find a way to integrate them into your culture. And if you
Mhm.
don't want to take the time, you just want to keep on, grabbing somebody from this company and grab somebody that already has it. It's like, well, how are you going to build the next generation of people? You're just grabbing people that already know it,
Yeah.
and I see that there's a big problem. Like in what I do, we're always
Yeah.
looking for somebody that already knows it instead of trying to train somebody how to do it.
Yeah. The old master teaching the apprentice type of thing. And one of the things what you're talking about it as a project lead, I had to start to learn and understand how to write and read business requirements and then functional requirements, which are kind of what you evolved or that evolved from you. But what I noticed too is that a lot of those people really they struggled with the being able to get their message across clearly, concisely. And so the public speaking aspect of what I do became really apparent that it was an asset that I was involved in public speaking because I could share what my thoughts were or interpret for others. And so I kind of wanted to just go out and say, okay, all of you geeks, please come and see me so I can help you to be able to get ahead because that was a lot of times, they're the type of personality that is happy to work in front of their computer and have no other people talking to them and
Yeah, yeah,
and then they're the ones though that know the stuff and the bosses are saying, okay, come and explain it to the board.
yeah.
And the board
Yeah.
is it's just painful
That's where I
sometimes.
kind of came in. Yeah, the
Uh-huh.
BSAs came in, and it all got segmented. You have the QAs and you have the BSAs, you have the
Mm-hmm.
architects,
Yes,
and you have
yes.
the managers. And in the BSAs, we've always kind of been the ones like we started to realize in our software development that we do love the programmer that can't talk to the people, but they talk to me, and
Yes.
I can
And then you
understand them. Yeah, so then we say, well, we're not going to bring him to the meeting, but he'll
yes.
talk to me, and then I'll relay what he's saying, and then kind of bridge the gap so he doesn't get fired forget,
Yeah.
you know,
That's exactly
and
right.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes the executives, they see these guys, they I don't like, they don't get it. Like we need him. We don't fire him, please. But
No.
they kind of come across wrong to the certain people, and they're like, why do we have guys like that? It's like, well, you don't get it, but that's part of it. That's part of
Well, then the other aspect of that, whenever you're thinking about leadership, is that some senior people will see somebody that is really good and vital to the organization in that role of programmer, and they think, well, to get more money for them, I need to promote them
Mhm.
to a role that they do not want. They are not they are not trained for it. They are not happy in it. And so then you have somebody who is not good as a leader in a leadership role.
Yeah,
And
it's a bad
so
situation.
it's a bad thing, it's like, got to think about that.
Which is why we've
And if,
tried to find, like, yeah, move that guy to the senior programmer level or to the architect level.
yeah,
You still keep him in
create.
the roles within that
Mhm.
levels within that, to not say that everybody's got to be a manager, everybody's got to be a director, everybody's got to be a CIO.
Yeah.
So, some people aren't ready for that, or they rather
Yeah.
be the top of the architect team or the
Hmm.
database design team, and
Yeah.
they could teach tons of new people, right?
Yeah.
If you put them in that role rather than trying to get them into the C suite or
Yeah.
the A level suite, that doesn't always work, you know.
Yeah, because all they really ultimately want is more money for
Yeah,
their families, and to see that they're growing in their career, that they're not stagnant as anybody. But don't put them in a role that's going to make them frustrated, or have other people leave because they're so poor at managing people.
yeah. Some folks aren't really good at that kind of
Yeah.
communication, and then
Yeah.
also, like, what you found is this idea of empowerment and empathy,
Yeah.
which is really kind of, some people don't have that mindset. I mean, they're kind of like, let's do it like a military
Oh yeah.
academy and be very top down,
Hmm.
like a coach that's like, trying to teach you to do the Boston marathons, like it's got to do or die, and it's like, well, sometimes, that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
So
So you have to think too. It's not only that they are unhappy, but sometimes it impacts their health. And now
oh,
you have
oh
somebody
yeah,
that you have to pay out as a company all of these medical bills because of their ulcers and
you're
all the
stressing out.
other strains back. And it could have all been avoided if you looked at that person holistically, and see what they're capable of, what they want. Ask them, what do you want? When you hire somebody, don't only hire them, for the job that they have. Ask them open-ended questions in a way that will bring out, what do they want to be? What excites them? Where do they think they want to go? It's you'll have some people that say, "Oh, I want to be the CEO," and then it's like,
Yeah,
okay, well,
they
do
pay
you
me.
even know what that job it takes?
Yeah, I think part of it is like when you're leading with your heart, your head, and your mind. Like, a lot of people is like, I'm a right brain type of person. I'm a musician and I'm an
Hmm.
artist and I'm a programmer, analyst. So I can kind of access both, all of it. And
Yeah,
what I've tried to push is bringing kind of more artist type people or
yeah,
creative type people into enterprises. And then I run into issues where, like, the bell curve, where, like, if you measured Einstein right on a test, he got D's in math,
yeah,
but that
yeah,
didn't really show his capability. And I'm always
yeah.
trying to tell people, like, sometimes if you measure this person on some kind of static, measurement, you might not find their brilliance. You might think,
Hmm.
put them in a category and they're in the wrong place. Like, if I can see
Yeah.
that this person's super creative, but they're not very good at communicating, or they're not very good at writing reports, but they're brilliant at certain tasks, right? And then you miss it. It's kind of like you
Yeah.
miss that kind of capability. And there's a lot of problems with, like, people who have, disabilities. My daughter is a big disability advocate, and
Hmm.
she's in the arts. You would think in
Yeah.
the arts they'd be into it, but she's been pushing for disability awareness within the arts because
Yeah.
there's kind of like some biases. and she's been doing these big programs to, like, as an art director, to show how many people you're kind of leaving out because you're not thinking
Hmm.
in a holistic way. And I think
Yeah.
organizations like businesses do the same thing. They don't realize they might have some people, they're on different scales, that have a lot of capability, but you're trying to put them in one box. And
Hmm.
that everybody's not in that box. But it
No,
doesn't mean they
no.
can't help the enterprise.
Well, and you have to think, as you're building a team, like a project team, that you want it to be high performance. You don't want everybody the same. You do need that creative person. You need that person that's real organized. You need that person that's mathematical or finance based kind of mindset. All of those people will make the magic. But as the team lead, you need to be able to be that quarterback, or that person that is the orchestra conductor, if you will, if you take it from the arts, where they
Mhm.
make the magic, make the music, and all of those different things together. If you think of an orchestra where you have all of those different instruments that could,
Instrument, yeah.
and it sometimes make terrible music, but whenever you get them all working at the same, you know insight and same, it is magic. It is wonderful. And so don't hire people for their resume. Hire them
Yeah.
for their attitude. Hire them for their volunteering. Hire them for, and that's the hands part of my thing. Hire them for their mindset, their how they are creative and innovative. Ask them questions that will make you say, okay, in this situation, how would you handle it? And let them think strategically. How do they think strategically? Or are they only operational? Because now I know, okay, I got to keep them in operations until we can teach them and train them maybe to be more strategic. But too often they don't think of that. They think, oh, I need somebody to fill this role. This resume looks good. I'm going to put them in. And then they're cancer for the rest of the team.
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes, like, like, when I went to school, it was the holistic kinda mindset, or the liberal arts mindset of a school like a Bowdoin is very much into the Socratic method. And even when I got into the school, it wasn't just based on my SATs. It was kind of based on the fact that I had to do like an essay, and I went there. I actually went in front of a board of people, and they actually talked to me, and they had me
Mm,
check out the school, and I sent tapes of my music. I showed the stuff I was doing in student council. I showed I was kind of very
nice.
holistic person. I wasn't just a one trick person, pony. Like, I wasn't just doing one thing really good and that's it,
Hmm.
and it was a combination of my whole self, and that's been like their mindset continually, is to bring in
Yeah.
people that it's not just one thing, but it's like the whole package of this person. And I think
Yeah.
people make the mistake, like you said, just looking at the resume without
Mhm.
really looking at the whole person.
Yeah. And what you said is really important for anybody that is going to college, or trying to get scholarships. Uh, Whenever I teach the public speaking to the youth, the reason I do that so passionately is because I want them to have an edge over others. Because how you speak goes into how you write and how you answer questions, and and involving them in understanding that you should, as you're doing those essays, bring in how you have volunteered. And if you're not volunteering, you need to do that. Volunteering is such a great way to expose you not only to different skills and processes, but also you can be working hand in hand with CEOs and CFOs, all of those C suite people that you may never, ever get to talk to, but now you're working hand in hand, and for hours where you could be getting to pick their brains, and they're getting to see you and your work ethic and your mindset, and could be a future job for you just because you spent that time building a house, or handing out food.
Well, you learn how to tell your story. One of the things I
Yeah.
find in business, I'm in business for a while, and it's the elevator pitch or the storytelling. Like when we
Yeah,
go to
lots of
find new
those.
candidates, it's the one who actually can do a very concise elevator pitch that is like, wow, that I remember what they said. I
Yeah.
go back through all the candidates we talked to, and it's like, wow, I can remember exactly what this person did because they had a very unique story in their elevator pitch, or the point that they knew how to make it concise. They weren't all over the map, but they were able to put out some key points that would
Mm,
make them memorable. Like they actually
cool.
took some thought and
Yes.
it wasn't just saying, well, I have this tech skill, I got this certification, with not being
Yeah.
able to kind of tell that story, to tell
Yeah.
about their passions, tell about where, who they are. And I think
Yeah.
people don't understand how important that is. Like I said, back in the school I went to, we didn't just have multiple choice. We had blue books at the end of every exam, a period. And we had to
Hmm.
show that we understood that subject
Yeah.
of
Nice.
sociology or philosophy or anything we were into. And it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to know which one to, select the X, or, you had to explain
Hmm.
it. And then they kind of
Hmm.
knew if you really got what the professor had been teaching all semester, because
Yeah.
it wasn't just spitting it back out. You were understanding it and putting it in your own words, which I think some
Exactly.
people don't know how to do. And
No.
it really is something that you could build up, getting certificates, and that's fine. But like building up your communication skills, like what you're saying, the public
It's
speaking,
huge.
or being able
It's
to
huge.
tell that story, that's very important.
Yeah, and that's when I work with people, even from my coaching, I'll have them go through their pitches or their speeches and just kind of give them an evaluation of what did I hear, what did I feel as you were talking, what did I see you doing that might be distracting or take them up focus off of what your words are saying. And it's really so vital in every aspect of what we do, from you know dating to meeting people, to be able to buy a car or a house or whatnot. How you communicate is just so important, and it's so tied to being a good leader. And I think so many times as we're doing our pitches or things, we think, well, we have to just like dump all this information. And I always teach, you only want to give them 3 or 4 things. You want to leave them hungry. It's like that. And there's more, but I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to ask me another time, come back again. But it's really interesting, how people kind of shy away from that. Whenever do a great interview, it's one that you ask a lot of questions after they answered a question. So tell me more. And some people get all like worried. It's like, well, did I do it wrong? Did I give the wrong answer? And it's like, no, your interviewer, if you're doing it right, is just trying to pull out every little aspect, all the best of what you know, to make you shine in their eyes. They're not trying to trip you up, but they're just trying to make you shine.
Yeah, it's like that. There's a famous author technique. I remember I was taking in my English classes. Like, there's this line you can say that will kind of show you the creativity of like a very small, like, sentence, like a baby's
Yeah.
shoes never worn. Right? There's
Wow.
that famous sentence that comes from a famous author, and we were taught in like literature class, because then you're like, you could go and be very verbose, but when you have that line, "A baby's shoes never worn," it's like, what does that invoke? Like, why were they never worn? And then you can start to your imagination opens up, and you could start a
Mhm.
story. You can like, well, how could you? The plan was like, well, tell the kids, like, give them that line. It's like, well, what do you think you could do with that? What do you think you could bring? You don't have. Sometimes it's very simple. It's even in music. Sometimes we could layer and layer and layer tracks, or we could have
Yeah.
something very simple and have space. And when you have space between the notes, then you have more opportunities than the too much layering.
Mm.
You take away imagination, you take away some possibilities. So it's the same thing with your words. If you're more concise, or you're kind of leaving something open,
Yeah.
then people will ask you the question.
Yeah. And whenever I talk about public speaking, I always talk. My one keynote is about it's just a conversation, and I bought the URLs for all of that. So it's just a conversation I own. But it really is. how in a great speech or presentation, it is just a conversation, because a conversation is so rich and it takes you on that roller coaster ride, how your vocal variety and all of those things. But the one thing that I think people are so afraid of is the pause. And the
Mm.
pause is it's so important, because it allows your audience to catch up with you or to soak in what you just said. Between the pause and alliteration, where you repeat things. One of my the student groups that I work with, one of the coaches always makes sure he repeats 2 or 3 times a keyword that he wants to sink into these middle school and high schoolers. You've got to remember this, and
Mm.
in a song, that's the hook. Why do we say
Yeah.
that
Oh,
over and over, that piece? That's makes it memorable. And so when I teach public speaking, I often tie it into music, because I think if you listen to a great song, it can tell you how to make a great speech. All of those things, the
yeah.
different
I mean, it's
notes, the
yeah.
pace, the everything, the pause, how impactful can be a long note in a song? Well, that's a pause.
But yeah, if you think about like some of the classic songwriters of the 60s and the 70s, they had an intro, they have the chorus, they have variations on the
Mhm.
chorus, they have an outro. There's a structure. And when you go into the classic pop songs, they have that structure where they have the key hook or chorus line, but
Mhm.
it's part of like a story. Most of those
It is.
songs are stories that kind of give you an idea. Even when they were talking to the Beatles and they were talking to George Martin, he was talking about like we want to set this kind of stage of a sound painting
Mhm.
in your mind.
Exactly.
And when I was working, when you say he was working with the lads, he said we had to build this kind of sound painting that makes people feel
Mhm.
like they're listening to like a Monet. The idea that
Mhm.
you could do that and you can tell that story. It's like a visual story that kind of embeds images in your
Mhm.
brain. But there's something about that, the way you're leaving
Mhm.
that kind of imagination open to kind of like that, that sentence I said about like the baby shoes never worn. It's like you kind of leaving
Mhm.
things open so people interpretation to,
Yeah.
in the great songs, there's these hooks, but what does it mean to you as an
Yeah.
individual listener? It's like you can kind of take it in and it's real important to be able to capture an audience and have them,
Mhm.
you know, drawn into that. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes today we got so much layering and there's not enough pausing. There's not enough open
Mhm.
space in a lot of modern music. It's very
Mhm.
overdone and over embellished and too perfect. No,
Yeah.
lack of happy
Oh, there's a
accidents,
good
lack
word.
of yeah, we call happy accidents in our music. Concepts is like we didn't try to make it perfect. If you think about the
Yeah.
stuff from the 70s, it was it was analog. It wasn't digital.
Yeah.
We didn't correct the BPM. We didn't correct the note. We didn't go back and fix it. Like you
Mhm.
did a live take, and eventually the live take was good enough, but it wasn't human like perfect. And there's so
Yeah.
much perfection today that it leaves out the imperfections in art is
Uh,
kind of what makes the art.
I always I always say, perfect is boring. And if we go back to leading with the heart, the head, and the hands, when you think about it, if if you take on all this that we're talking about with the communication as a leader, you sometimes wonder why leaders don't have people that follow them, that will be loyal, fall on a sword, if you will, kind of thing for them. And it's because they just stick to the facts, the figures, the profit line, and not get to know their people. And when they speak to them, they don't speak to them as a, a family or a team or a community. They speak to them as just bodies out there, right? And so
Mhm.
that's where the empathy has to come. Your people have to know that you feel what they feel, that you understand where they're coming from, that you've been there, that you've walked in that way. And if you don't understand, then you need to be vulnerable enough to admit that and ask them to explain as clearly and as concisely as they can how they feel and why, what they want you to know, to understand. And then once you get that trust, that's when you can share the mission and the vision and show them strategically how they're part of the plan. And
Mhm.
then, of course, the hands come in as you have to be a servant leader. You have to be able to give more than you get.
It's kind of like the startup. I've been in a bunch of startups, and
Yeah,
the one thing
yeah,
when, like, when I was in a startup company, that everybody was giving their all and they were really passionate. And you put in the crazy hours because you believed in it. You're on the
yeah,
ground floor. And I think when people don't feel like, well, I can just replace this person with AI,
yeah.
or I can just go grab another person and there's just another body in the cubicle. Compared to in the startup mentality, everybody's in that war room. Everybody's like on
Hmm.
on call, jumping in, working on the weekend, working at 2 o'clock in the morning on something because you got to get it done. And it's not just because they told you to do it top down. It's because you
Yeah,
have a buy-in that you're probably gonna get, stock bonuses, whatever. But you felt like you're tied to it. But
yeah,
when you make people feel like they're not really tied to it and you could just be replaced at a the drop of a hat, well, what are you gonna get?
yeah. You get nothing. You get nothing. And even for me, even being in the large company that I was in, but we had startup like projects. I was there whenever they first, my group was the one that built the diet, the thing that you sign now. Before that it was just paper, and I was there for us to start our shipping systems, and it was that war room app, and it was like everybody in, and it was, I don't know what's going on, we're just going to try it, and launching
Mhm.
international, and then the UPS store. All those things gave us the ability to see how we were part of that. And and the fact that we didn't know what we didn't know made it not so um, worrying about being perfect, right? Because we didn't know what perfect even looked like. And
Mhm.
I think that's what people just are, even as entrepreneurs out there. You are too worried about being perfect, so you don't go online. Part of what I teach is how to be comfortable in this video environment. It's not going away. I'm so sorry, but
Yeah.
this is what you have to do, and more creative ways of using this are going to come. So get comfortable, figure out what to do. Work with me or anyone that can help you. But all of these things help you to make it exciting, and you need to always find things to re-energize your team and re-energize your company to make it exciting again.
Yeah, I had a podcaster on that was like he was a DJ and he found a way to get into corporate retreats and come in with like a team building exercise that was about writing a song or performing a
Oh, cool.
song and showing what it takes to do that kind of off the cuff to get people's creative juices flowing and saying it, just showing how, like, well, how does that relate? Well, creative processes can apply
Yeah,
to multiple things. So the music is
yeah,
very easy to kind of get people to buy into and then say, "Oh, yeah, that can get you in that creative mindset." But he found a way to pitch it, and he's been very successful at integrating something that people would say, "Well, how can you do that?" That's like
yeah,
business and that is two different things. And this is where the world is today: is the integration between like the arts and
yeah,
creativity, and people who are influencers and all these platforms that we're on, like now, where you can have this instant communication. If you do ad campaigns with influencers that are that are on Twitch and TikTok, and I've seen
hmm,
companies doing it where they're actually doing these lower fi ads with people where it's not perfect, where the
yeah,
audio is not perfect. It seems like it's a purposely not perfect, and it looks like it's just somebody talking out of their bedroom or some. They want. I think they're looking for the authenticity, kind of like the punk movement
yeah,
where they got a he had Kurt Cobain or something. The idea that when they had these corporate bands, people got
yeah,
tired of it and they wanted something more
yeah,
real. Then you had, Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. You had Eddie Vedder
yeah,
from Pearl
yeah,
Jam. You got these people
hmm,
where you started getting like, well, that seems like these guys are poets. And you're going back to that where they're not trying to all be all flash. They actually were
hmm,
trying to be more heart. And you see
yeah,
every time people go back to that kind of heart, I
hmm,
think they get more, more of a connected experience.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to start to incorporate, and that means I'm going to have to go for more training, if you will, or more involvement, is improv, because I find that it really helps you to be creative. And a couple of times that I've done it where people are just like, oh, I don't know, and they just don't let themselves go. And I'm thinking, you know what? But again, if it's not going to put me in jail and it's not going to kill me, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. And it really does get the creative juices going. So, get away from doing all these little post-its all over the wall trying to figure out things and start doing some improv, I think. Have fun.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we started doing with during the COVID, a lot of musicians started to do things where they would just go live
Yeah.
and do
I
from their
think,
bedroom studio, like me. I'm in my bedroom studio, right? And they just kind of just went off the cuff, kind of just jamming. And
yeah,
when they found it, like there's a lot of albums that got created from the fact that like, hey, I'm just gonna jam. I'm just gonna do
yeah,
something like totally stream of consciousness and then see what
yeah.
happens. And then go from there. And there's a lot of creativity that happens. I've talked to authors before that kind of go into this kind of improv, kind of stream of consciousness, to sit there and write a book on a notepad or type it into something. But the idea that you kind of do this unstructured, this flow state type of thing, there's a lot of development. I've even run into, engineers that do that. They kind of just go into this flow state and just let me kind of just flow it out. And then like, wow, then they find, if they kind of get to this dream state or not be scared of it,
Mm,
they get
yeah,
these ideas that they wouldn't have gotten if they're too logical. They sometimes you
yeah.
have to let it go, but let it
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah. We one of the exercises I did was brain writing, which is kind of like that. But the hardest thing for a lot of people is they want to tell you why it won't work. And it's like, but the whole point of this is just to try to think. People told us we couldn't fly, the the you couldn't fly, you couldn't. Who would have thought whenever I was, in high school, that we would have these phones that we have, or the cameras that we
Yeah.
have, all these things that our kids and my grandkids are exposed to. And there's going to be just so many more things. So it's going to take people doing things that are innovative and creative. And it's going to mean that the leaders need to allow them to be that way.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Star Trek, like I'm a big sci-fi guy, and what you see all the time is like we're getting closer and closer to the sci-fi as like Asimov, Ray Bradbury,
Hmm.
Gene Roddenberry. Those ideas they had where they were supposed to be just fiction are getting closer to being true. You know,
Yeah.
the stuff that we had, like the tricorder and the communicate, they're like the cell phones.
Yeah.
Those ideas are not so far fetched anymore. And
No.
so the idea that being able to be creative, have that creative mindset of an Isaac Asimov or a Gene Roddenberry, the George
Mhm.
Lucases, the Stevens, those ideas, it's not just fiction. You can actually, AI, the idea of data is actually starting to come true. The
Yeah.
idea that you can have sentient AI is not so far fetched anymore.
Yeah.
That
I,
actually could happen in our lifetime. So
mhm.
the tech is expanding so fast, and there's so many opportunities to kind of live in a box when the world is not a box.
Yeah.
Is not really going to give you a good return.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that the creative the creativity sometimes is in some of the larger companies, because the market kind of dictates what what is good or not, and it allows, or it doesn't allow you to be bold and
Mm.
and take chances and fail. I loved in the last years of my project management time, that I was doing agile projects
Mm.
where you tried it, it broke, you figured out why it broke, and then you tried again, as opposed to the waterfalls where, you mapped it all out and you had your project plan and you hope the hell it worked the way it's supposed to, and a lot of times it did and a lot of times it didn't, and that was a failure, and you thought, oh god, I failed. Well, I learned a whole heck of a lot from all those failures that I've had in my life, and so I think as leaders we need to embrace failure and not um, you know make sure that you learn the lesson from it, but don't shy away from it or ridicule your people or fire them because they failed. Um, Help them learn from it and get better.
But you see companies like Tesla and Apple, they have there's a lot of failure in the leading edge companies for all the
Yeah, you
things
have
that
to.
they succeed on. You look at the engineers, because I'm real into tech, and see how many different variations of what they were
Hmm.
trying to do with the iPhone before they actually put it out, or the iMac,
Yeah,
or the early Apple products. They ran through a lot of things that didn't work. Right? There's a lot of that in these companies. They're kind of bleeding edge in terms of what they're willing to try. Um,
yeah,
and it's really like as a musician, we run into it all the time. It's like we write 100 demos and one song, one version works. It's
yeah,
in the nature of being an artist that happens a lot. It happens
yeah.
most of the time, and we don't we don't give up. Well, some of us
Hmm.
do, but most of us don't. It's like, yeah, some stuff doesn't work, but did we
Yeah,
look at it as a failure, or was it a step on a road to the thing that did work? Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's the mindset.
My husband and my daughter are both left and right brain people like you. Math and arts are both their high points. And my husband had a shoulder injury and had to have a shoulder replacement just before he was retiring. And so he couldn't his shoulder until they allowed the insurance allowed for him to have the shoulder replacement. His right arm was almost useless. He shook too
Mhm.
bad, so he couldn't draw anymore. And so I bought him an iPad and the pencil, the pen that comes with it. And it changed the whole perspective of what he could do, and allowed his art to be enhanced by the fact that there was, the erase mode, if you will, of trying
Yeah,
something. Okay, I'll do this, I'll try it, or the layering that you talked about, the things that he can do on, and my daughter can do on the computer just amaze me. My daughter went to SCAD, yay SCAD,
mhm,
Savannah College of Art and Design, and I
yeah,
I
yeah, like,
was
that's cool.
I was that terrible parent that the day that we toured the place that I thought I probably asked more questions than any kids, because every place that we went with the technology and the things that they were doing were so fascinating and so encouraging. And and I thought all the people that are coming out here, just as you said, they teach them to be very rounded so they can go into business and take that art understanding and put that creativity that we need in business
Mhm,
back in business.
yeah,
It's
it's
just
kinda like
fascinating.
the art the artisan era before the industrial age, where everybody kinda had custom stuff, and now people are realizing, even if you're a big manufacturer, that the age of customization, because of AI and because of robotics and because of the technology today, we can make very customized products
Yeah.
that are more individualistic than monolithic, which
Hmm.
then also requires a lot of artistic mindsets, that it's not all gonna just be the cookie cutter one thing, that you're
Yeah.
gonna be able to have, even from big multinational companies that normally wouldn't do that, will have the capability to make very customized products to individual preferences,
Hmm.
which is really exciting. And when you think about what is gonna happen, is the
Yeah.
ability for people to actually have something that's not the same for every person, even though it's coming from some big company.
Yeah.
That's the kind of future that we're going into. So there's a lot of opportunities for artists or creative type people that would have thought that, well, I don't want to work for corporate America because they're going to put me in the cubicle and I'm not going to be able to do what I want. So I got to go do something else. and it's starting to open up where people realize that you need to have those kind of people on the teams.
Yeah, you
There's a
do.
place for those type of people.
And I will say, in the beauty of the career that I had at UPS was that I was there for 27 years and I probably had 27 different jobs. Because and the exposure that I had to all these different things made me more of an asset for wherever I would go, and made me stronger
Hmm.
and better. And so you can be in that larger company and have 27 different jobs, or you could be in a smaller company and then hop to another smaller company or another smaller company kind of thing. It's really whatever you want in life. For me, I was at that point, having laid off husband and laid off me. I needed the stability of a large company.
Hmm.
But now here I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to figure out how to make it work in that aspect to this last, I look at 30 years. I'm 65, so I'm going to go for at least 95.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the program, because I think we had a really wide ranging conversation. But
Yeah.
at the core is, people, the idea of emotional intelligence in leadership,
Yeah.
and asking questions and not being confined to not being able to live out your dreams, and being able to ask questions or do things that maybe you didn't think you could do, is this getting that confidence, which I think maybe
Mm.
coming to a person as a life coach, some people need to build that up, and they need to come to somebody like yourself, and they check out your website to get you know connected, to figure out where you need assistance, because I think some people start to realize, they look at themselves critically and realize where they need help, or they need to
Yeah.
get better at what they're trying to do with their career and their life. And
People
we love
need
to bring
people
people like
need that.
yourself, yeah, to the
People
show.
need
So
a coach. A lot of time, it's a sounding board. I'm not going
mm,
to tell you how to do things. I'm just going to give you insights. Um, been there, done that kind of thing. But it's really you. It still comes all back to you, your attitude, your ability to say yes, and know when to say no.
well, you're gonna bring out the authentic self. That's my whole point as
Mm.
a producer. Is I want to, when I talk to a musician, I don't want to make them a copy of somebody else. I want to bring out what I know is there, and what
Mm.
maybe they might be scared to do. But all I want to do is bring their authentic self to the world, and have them succeed. And I think that's what you're trying to do too. At the end of the day, they're going to do it. They're the artists,
Yeah.
right? I'm just going to help them get to the point where
Yeah.
they can break through. And I think that's what a lot of
Mm.
mentors and life coaches. That's what you're trying to do too. So thank you again
Mm.
for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Have a great night.